Okay.
Thank you.
Great. All right.
Andy?
Please go ahead. Welcome Great Old Broads at the Border.
Thank you, Sandy, and thanks everybody for joining us. I'm Roz Switzer. I'm the Middle Gila Broadband Leader out of Florence, Arizona. And the Arizona Great Old Broads for Wilderness Leaders spent several days mapping the environmental destruction at the border with our partners, Miles Traphagen, who is the Borderlands Program Coordinator for Wildlands Network, and Kate Scott, the owner of the Madrian Archipelago Wildlife Center. And this cover photo here is our camp at Kate's Ranch. It's about 11 miles from the border. And thank you, Kate, for having us. It was lovely. So in the last 2 years of the Trump administration, construction really ramped up along 450 miles of the border, and most of that construction was in Arizona. So the purpose of our trips were to assist the Borderlands Coalition in assessing where and what this construction was so that its effects on wildlife corridors, habitat, and water could be determined, and then a recommendation made to the new administration on priority areas that need to be opened up. Now, it needs to be understood that the reason that this environmental damage was even allowed to occur without recourse is due to the Real ID Act. And this is a 2005 law that allowed the Department of Homeland Security to waive all legal requirements along the borderlands regarding construction of barriers and construction of roads. So all laws that were protecting endangered wildlife, public lands, clean water, clean air were ignored. And Congress needs to repeal this Section 102C of the Real ID Act so this abuse of power can be stopped. So we have selected a couple of photos, or a few photos from our travels to give you a sense of the borderlands today. And next, Jenny will show you the San Pedro River.
It's not letting me have the next slide. Why? There it is. I don't know what I did. Okay, this is the pretty and peaceful San Pedro River. It is the last undammed, free-flowing river in the entire Southwest that still hosts a substantial acreage of riparian forest. This section of the river is part of a riparian area consisting of around 57,000 acres, or about 40 miles of the upper San Pedro River. It was designated by Congress as a national conservation area in 1988. The primary purpose was to protect, enhance, and conserve the desert riparian ecosystem. The river flows north from Mexico near Hereford, Arizona. Wildlife depends on this important riparian area for water, migration, and food sources. Besides this important wildlife corridor here at the San Pedro, the Santa Cruz River and many springs and ephemeral washes have been affected along the border. Important wildlife habitat has been cut in half, and 93 endangered species are in great peril. Of these 93 species, 88 have populations on both sides of the border. Some of these are the Aurora toads, the North Mexican garter snake, and the Chiricahua leopard frog, as well as numerous birds, insects, fish, and mammals. I want to go back one. Let's see. This is the river at the border in February of 2020, and there's only a vehicle barrier, and wildlife can still journey north and south. Here's the border crossing now. There is a concrete bridge and large, sharp rocks extending through this riparian area for about 1/4 of a mile. Someone said it resembles a fortress with massive floodgates, a concrete bridge, and light poles that tower over the riverbed. Lighting like this is found all along the border. In a year-long study, the Sky Island Alliance found that around 70% of the wildlife caught on their cameras were nocturnal. Bright lights confuse and disrupt animals, impacting their movements and ability to obtain food. The walls here are made, and all along this border, are made of 30-foot tall steel walls called bollards, and they sit in a foundation several feet deep, filled with rebar and concrete. They are 6 feet wide and separated from each other by 4 inches of space. The gates on the wall across the river are designed to allow water to flow through the wall when opened. There are 66 heavy steel gates here at the San Pedro that were originally welded together. Miles noticed that the gates were welded shut and posted photos online, and as a result, the temporary tacked welds were removed. But who's going to open these gates, and how quickly in the event of potential flooding? These huge locks require specialized machinery to unlock them manually. The extensive concrete will supposedly keep the foundation from being destroyed in the event of extensive flooding. You can see how massive they are here. The fence was designed to prevent vehicles and pedestrians from crossing. However, there was little or no consideration for erosion, flooding, destroying wildlife migration corridors, and fragmenting wildlife habitat. When we were there in April, one gate was open in the river. Even if the gate is opened, it is backed by 2 rows of barbed wire fencing, and it is designed to keep the cattle in Mexico from coming through to the United States. So wildlife, small or large, is coming to the border, and they meet up with this fence, and perhaps ungulates might be able to vault the barbed wire. But they meet a fence that's 30 foot tall. It's an impenetrable border, a barrier for them. And the wall is set in concrete. The gates, by the way, are usually not open. So there are no environmental safeguards or mitigation planned to prevent environmental destruction. We must restore this critical riparian habitat for wildlife who need this corridor. Limiting wildlife migration shrinks the gene pool, reduces diversity, and populations dwindle further. Our next speaker is Roz.
Thanks, Jenny.
You're welcome.
Throughout all these photos being presented today, I want you to notice how massive this construction is. It isn't just a little strip along the border. The construction zone has destroyed substantial swaths of habitat. So this is Camaro Mountain, which is east of Sassabee, and it's been blown up as a first step in construction. The picture next to it shows Walker Canyon, and these are 13-inch pipes, which are undersized for the seasonal stream water flow that's going to occur with the monsoon floods. So inadequate or suspect engineering is evident throughout all the borderlands, and we don't even know what engineering or building specifications were used, as it's not transparent. Next. So a deeply cut and wide road with 6 switchbacks climbed up the western Huachuca Mountains here. And these mountainous regions are a vast connected expanse of habitat for many species. But there are numerous species that won't cross these wide, open, degraded areas. And on the right-hand side, you're looking at a male ocelot. He's one of the last in Arizona. He was caught on a trail cam in the Huachuca Mountains. And he is an example of this. He's cut off from the rest of the population, which is 40 miles to the south. He's cut off by not only the wall, but also by the construction zone. I'm going to quote Dr. Niels here, and she's the one credited in the photo. But among ocelots, migratory routes are passed down for generations. When there are obstacles, the cats do not instinctively walk along the wall to an opening, but they simply turn back. In addition, the clearing of brush from the land has taken away ocelots' ability to blend in with the landscape, and thus they are more vulnerable to predators. Next. So we climbed up the 6 switchbacks to the top of the mountain, and this is what we were greeted with. There was a 700-foot section of orphan bollard wall attached to nothing at the top of the mountain. And on the last bollard, spray painted, was the date, January 20th, which was inauguration day. So that was a last in your face gift from the contractor responsible for this area. I want you to note the boundary marker number 102 here. So these obelisks were originally erected around 1850 to mark the international boundary. And on this hike up the mountain, it was very interesting because we saw the progression of how our country has delineated this international boundary, this international border with Mexico. So we started out with these boundary monuments, and then we moved to barbed wire, which was to keep the cows in. And then we moved to these crisscross Normandy walls, which were a vehicle barrier. And now we are dealing with this impenetrable bollard wall. And the other interesting thing about the top of the mountain here is it is the southern terminus of the Arizona Trail. So for any of you familiar with this 800-mile trail, this is where it ends. And a park bench still sits on the knoll across this deeply, wide cut road, but you no longer have the unrestricted views of the beautiful mountains into Mexico. Next. So when construction was halted, the contractors were supposed to clean up their areas and make them safe, and they definitely did not. This is an open trench in the Patagonia Mountains. It went on for at least a mile. We measured it up to depths of 10 feet deep, and there were some sections of rebar sticking up. Any animal that slips into this trench can't get out. There aren't any ramps. And additionally, the soil here is very loose volcanic, subject to erosion. When we got near to this trench, it just was crumbling right under our feet. The photo to the right shows a section east of Naco that was left in a dangerous condition. You can see we have open rebar, excavated trenches, and we have unstable sections of the wall that have to be braced. So we found these conditions everywhere along the border that we visited. Next. So the border road is supposed to be no more than 60 feet. That's the legal limit. And this border road through this section, we were heading towards the Santa Cruz River, well over that. To get an idea of the scale, that tiny figure at the bottom left there is Kate, if you can see her at the bottom of the road. So we found wide roads everywhere in the borderlands, and we measured one at 110 feet. As we approached Nogales, we did encounter a bollard wall that had been enhanced by this concertina razor wire, and birds do get caught in this cruel wire. Think about the ferruginous pygmy owl. That's in grave danger from loss of habitat. There's less than 50 of them remaining in the state of Arizona, and they fly low to the ground. It's possible they could get caught in this wire, but it's also they cannot clear a 30-foot bollard wall. So our ingenious species, we found plenty of ways to cross these walls, but wildlife has not. And so all the wildlife migration north and south is threatened. Next. So ephemeral water, which is the intermittent water that occurs through rainfall, actually makes up 95% of Arizona's stream miles. And our flora and our fauna have adapted to these periods of flooding and drought. Throughout the borderlands, these dry washes are the lifeblood of the desert, and they are the dominant feature. And in most sections of the border road that we passed, these washes were simply filled in by the contractor. On the left, this is again the section near Naco. They had placed some gates, not enough to handle the monsoons, but additionally, every single gate along that entire stretch had been blocked by the contractor with a combination of concrete barricades and piles of dirt. So there's currently no way to get them open when it rains. So the blocked monsoon floods, they're going to hit these barriers, they're going to eddy back into the washes. They're going to create increasingly deep and wide arroyos. And the habitat destruction is inevitable unless we can get these opened up so that the ecosystem can function as intended. I'll pass on to Kate now.
Thank you, Roz. Good evening, all. My name is Kate Scott, and along with my husband, Tony Heath, in 2017, we co-founded the Madrian Archipelago Wildlife Center, located in the Huachuca Mountains of southeastern Arizona, with a mission of building pathways of compassionate coexistence between people and wildlife. Tony has created recently 4 films documenting our work along the border, and following my presentation, I'll share that with you in the chat. So if I could have the first slide, please. All right, we joined in solidarity with the Tucson Samaritans on their monthly trek to Walker Canyon in the Pajarito Mountain Wilderness, where there's only a barbed wire fence denoting the border, to bring life-saving water and small tins of food that we placed in 5-gallon containers and at other locations along the trail. And I can tell you, this is a very arduous and exhausting hike when one is carrying up to 4 gallons of water each, weighing 8 pounds, which I attempted to do, had to leave one of the bottles along the trail. Noting on the right, or on the left, sorry, the photo shows the bottles, the jugs, and their statements declaring that this is a humanitarian effort and please do not destroy or confiscate. Brian Best led our hike and was an eyewitness on February 9th of 2021 in documenting the illegal road construction in Walker Canyon, which was shown in an earlier slide of Roz's with the pipes, of Fisher Sand and Gravel, who blatantly ignored Biden's proclamation to halt all border wall work. Next. Well, now we head further east to Guadalupe Canyon, and this is ground zero for biodiversity in North America, where bear meets jaguar meets Mexican gray wolf. This is a panoramic photo my husband Tony took. So if you look to the right, you'll see the terminus of the wall at this sector, and in the upper left, you can make out an orphan wall. This was one of 4 sectors along the border where I facilitated the journey with the University of California at Berkeley Environmental Planning grad student team, led by Professor Matt Kondo over this past Memorial Day weekend. October 2020, Professor Kondoff had attended a meeting I organized at the San Pedro River with key stakeholders and other activists with regards to the impact of the border wall. We were very, very concerned, and we met with Border Patrol and BLM and a number of other governmental agencies. He was very moved and decided to task his students to study the impacts of the border wall on water and wildlife in their spring 2021 projects. The students are focusing initially on analyzing the wall's impact in Guadalupe Canyon, San Bernardino National Wildlife Refuge, San Pedro River, and the Fisher Sand and Gravel Pajarito Mountain staging area. Their research aims to quantify the risk of dangerous dams forming along the border wall during floods, the erosion, the monumental erosion, I might add, that will be caused by this construction, and the impact on wildlife migratory corridors and the groundwater pumping. Next. Here you see Scott Walls on the left, and you'll see his drone is in the air in front of him. Professor Condolf, and followed by John Kirk in those two in that picture. The drone photogrammetry will allow us to see 3D imagery of the border wall construction, and this will greatly enhance their analysis. John Kirk, I want you all to know, is a drone pilot as well. He does two-dimensional drone flights. He's a documentary filmmaker and photographer who flew extensive flights here and all along the border, but he was primarily the first to witness and document the blasting, capturing it on film and on his drone flight. And it has gone and been covered by every major news network. So please move to the next one. All right, here's Professor Matt and Corey pounding in a permanent photo station point here on a sheer cliff edge, I might add, to benchmark and to begin documenting what I call the mine tailings. They refer to them as rubble piles. They work around these permanent points that they set into rock outcroppings with rebar, and then they photograph and document and do everything around them so they have a benchmark. Hence, we did these at all different sectors that we visited, but this was a good shot of him actually doing it. Next. This is yet another switchback road. Then this is the type of damage you'll see everywhere that they were getting their equipment up the mountains. Some, as in the Camaro Mountain one that Roz showed, they didn't get that far, luckily. So as you'll see in the photo on the upper left, there's a pile of bollards there. So they're still there. And this is all across the border. Everything is still there. As Roz says, it's a mess. Nothing was done. Next. So when we rounded the corner, I mean, not quite the corner, round the mountain as the song goes, this is what greeted us. Yet another orphan wall, going nowhere, connected to nothing, doing nothing. And what I've been able to piece together for information is what's up with all these border walls, orphan border walls, is these are the gaps. So when you hear an official talking about, we want to close in the gaps, this is what the contractors devised amongst themselves, Southwest Valley Constructors and Fisher Sand and Gravel, to leave these huge gaps to give justification for finishing it. So make no mistake, this is ecocide, the destruction of natural environment that is willfully done, premeditated, you might say. Next. Here we are, the Great Old Broads in our Mexican gray wolf solidarity stance at the Santa Cruz River east of Nogales. And the recovery zone for Mexican gray wolves began in Mexico with just 5 wolves released on a private ranch below the Boot Hill of New Mexico in 2011 along the Sonora-Chihuahuan state line. As of February 2018, 37 wolves had inhabited the mountains, primarily in the state of Chihuahua. In January of this year, a year-old wolf came across from Mexico, but tragically was killed crossing I-10 in eastern Arizona. And in 2017, a male wolf embarked on a 600-mile, 4-day jaunt across the border, crossing I-10 twice, looping close to Las Cruces before returning to Mexico. The border wall completely ends all natural connectivity between the US and Mexico. Migrations that are vital to infusing new genes into the separate populations. We need to continue to pressure our members of Congress for remediation and restoration funding to remove the wall at these critical migratory corridors and life-saving watersheds. Next, please. The most egregious, I believe, along the border is the Pajarito Mountain staging area. This was Fisher Sand and Gravel It still looks exactly like this. All this equipment is still there. Not one thing has been moved. And they're even servicing the vehicles because I was there over Memorial Day weekend. So they're ready to go. They haven't removed anything. And this is critical jaguar habitat in the Atascosa region, where Miles Trapagan told me when we shot a video here that 1995, slightly west of this area, the first jaguar had been noted in the Sycamore Canyon area. So for people to be leveling mountaintops to use as a work site when all the other contractors were on the ground, that it shows the egregious and what I referred to in the other one as ecocide. Next, please.
Hey, Kate, Emily
Yeah.
was able to join us, so we'll let
Oh,
Emily.
great. Oh, well, and take it away, Emily.
Hey, thank you, Kate. Hey, yes. Well, yeah, I'm Emily Matias. I am the Phoenix area Sonoran broadband leader and co-leader with Roz Switzer of the Middle Gila. So I'm going to talk about the Sasabe area here. This is the Sasabe staging area that Kate, Roz, and I visited on May 8th of this year. And as we were driving along the border road there, just out of Sasabe, we noticed this huge staging area, really, with this, you can see on the top photograph here, the cement trucks to the right, the gravel trucks to the left, this photograph of the lighting that they would use to work into the evenings, and this photograph on the bottom right. I want to point out that in the background, you can see Babakivari Peak, which of course you may know already is a sacred peak for the indigenous tribes of the area. And I thought it was rather ironic that it was there with all this construction or destruction going on. I want to add that this was a Saturday, and we did notice some personnel there, even on a Saturday. They did not tell me, I could not photograph, but they were there and looked like they were ready to get moving at any moment. Next, please. So as we drove along the road, we started to see evidence of groundwater depletion actions, which was, as we can see outside this car window here, it's a water tank with a pump. And then as we drove along a little further, we saw, this is the first of two holding ponds that we saw. And we're not sure if it's groundwater or spring water, but it's taking water out of the area in a time of extreme drought and climate change. I also thought it was ironic that there is a life jacket and a lifesaver there. And I was wondering who they're going to save. Next, please. Well, one good thing was we did see some animals, some deer, as you can see in the right-hand photograph here, and they were crossing through these gaps in the wall. As Kate mentioned, there are a lot of gaps, and what we saw in the Sasabe area was it was mostly wall, but there were these large, fairly large gaps every so often. Usually it seemed like they were by where there were washes. This one here may have lights. I think it's lights, maybe not cameras. But for now, the wildlife is getting through these gaps. And one good thing would be to be sure that gates don't go up in here like they have in San Pedro and other areas. So to keep that from happening. And then also areas where there are bollards piled up in front of the gaps to take those away. That would help the wildlife corridors. Next, please. Well, just to show that Great Old Broads, yes, we work hard, but we also save some time to have fun and laugh. And in the photograph on the left, you see we're near the Coronado National Monument, and we are straddling an old border fence, 1 foot in Mexico, 1 foot in the States. And the photograph on the top right here is, we're on Kate's land. Here's Kate to the right. We're camping and we're just toasting some good work at the end of the day. And on the bottom right, here's our intrepid Jenny Cobb, who is cooking for us. She's a great cook and makes our meals fabulous when we're camping. So now that's it for the Sasebe area that we have, and I'd like to hand it over to Sally Sharp, who is our grassroots regional coordinator. She will talk about advocacy.
Turn me off, please, Sandy. Thank you.
My name is Sally Sharp and I work for GRIJALVA Broads as the Four Corners Regional Coordinator, and one of my states is Arizona. So I'm here to talk about what we can do now and how to advocate for the removal of the wall and for restoration of the habitat. So we can do two things. The first thing we can do is call members of Congress, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then the next thing we can do is write letters to the editor, and I'll talk about that after I talk about calling members of Congress. So the first thing we can do is we can call decision makers about the fiscal year 2022 Department of Homeland Security Appropriations Bill. Now, the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Homeland Security already had their markup on June 30th, and the House Committee on Appropriations is having their markup tomorrow, July 13th. But we can reach the Senate Appropriations Subcommittee on Homeland Security, and that's still, the date has not been decided for the markup. And then the Senate Committee on Appropriations. Now, the one in yellow is the easiest one to tackle. It's about 10 folks, and let's see who they are. So I was going to put in the slide, but anyways, so the talking points for this are no new funding for border wall or barriers, and let's rescind any of the remaining and all previously appropriated funding for the construction of border walls and border barriers and related infrastructure. Then the important thing is to transfer the funding from Department of Homeland Security to the Department of the Interior, the Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife, and those other departments who understand how to remediate the environmental damage and prioritize the removal of wall segments that cause or threaten to cause imminent harm to people, community, wildlife, and land, or restoration of habitat. So here's a sample script. You would call them and you say, my name is Sally and I live where you live. And then I'm calling today to ask you to do everything to stop border funding for border walls and to rescind funds previously appropriated for the border wall. And then can this person request that any previously allocated border wall funding be transferred from the Department of Homeland Security to the Department of the Interior? Now, can you spend 20 minutes doing this important work? There's a list of about 10 people on this subcommittee. So can you do it? I think so. It's really important. And here are the names of the folks. So it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 senators, and the top 2 are the most important. So we're just asking for about 20 minutes, and we can do this. So some important points to keep in mind is you may get some pushback on your phone calls, so plan for it. Examples may include, you are not a constituent, and we have already rescinded the Department of Defense border wall funding. Now, you are a constituent because you live in the United States and this is your border. And they are representing you on this committee. And then just because they rescinded the Department of Defense border wall funding doesn't mean they've rescinded all the other funding, because they're different buckets of funding. So the next thing you can do is you can write letters to the editor, And this is a Department of Homeland Security plan that was released June 11th, 2021. So you can write a letter that that will be like saying, yes, this is a good plan. So let me tell you why. So the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Defense have previously been directed to cancel the wall projects funded with resources diverted from military construction and other efforts and return the remaining available funds to their original appropriated purposes. Great. They've also been directed to end the wall expansion and extent to the extent permitted by law, and address safety and environmental issues resulting from border wall construction under the previous administration, which they have not done yet, right? We can see the evidence of that. So what's in this plan that they wrote out this plan? So what is in the plan? They want to engage in a comprehensive review, detailed analysis of the environmental impacts, and then robust engagement with relevant stakeholders that we have not seen yet. So they want to say that they're gonna work with tribal communities, they're gonna work with border communities, they're gonna work with environmental organizations that they have not done before. So we want to make sure that we give them kudos for this plan, which means giving them kudos and thank the administration for planning for remediation of environmental damage. And then you tell why this is important to you, and then you make it personal. And you want to state a strong expectation for strong progress towards this goal. And I have an example of a statement from the Defenders of Wildlife. So it says, you can write something like this. You can't, of course, copy this, but you can write something like this. It says, we applaud the Biden administration for taking this important action to stop the continuing harm caused by the border wall. The reversal of funding and halt of construction projects are great steps, but there is still hard work ahead. We are optimistic that the administration will address the significant safety and environmental challenges and call on Congress to provide the funding required to repair the devastating damage. Defenders of Wildlife looks forward to seeing reconnected communities of both people and wildlife along the southern border soon. Now, this is one example of an LTE that's based on something that was written about a month ago, but there was another letter that came out just today. So we're going to talk about this letter as well. Either letter is fine. This next one has to do with the border, with the what's happening in Texas. So Representative GRIJALVA wrote a letter to Secretary Haaland, Secretary Vilsack, and some others to request support in protecting federal public lands and resources in Texas from being used for or impacted by this decision to use state and private donations to build more border wall. So he's asking for them to protect federal lands. And I was told that you all have funding for the Sierra Club in Arizona is concerned about all borderlands. And since this is your Representative GRIJALVA is from Arizona, it would be a good thing to give him some backing to back him up in an LTE. And so some things that you can, so when you write the GRIJALVA letter, you can see that there's certain things that you can emphasize. The existing border wall has already inflicted immeasurable harm on wildlife. GRIJALVA points out that wall construction projects are known to be high-risk targets for financial abuse. A recent GAO report says that the Trump administration's approach to awarding construction contracts for the border wall put more than $10 billion in taxpayer dollars at high risk for waste and efficiency. Then he talks about the Build the Wall campaign led by Brian Kolfage and Steve Bannon, who were later, indicted for wire fraud and money laundering. And then lastly, the border wall construction has been immensely destructive, costly, wasteful, marked by corruption. And and ineffective. And so there's the link on the bottom for that letter. Something that's really, that's a key point is this. So Representative GRIJALVA writes, as a representative of a border district myself, I know that border residents do not want militarization of their communities with walls, razor wire, and droves of National Guard troops, including those from faraway states like South Dakota, Idaho, and Florida. GRIJALVA writes, I urge you to protect Texans and Texas's invaluable public lands and resources from further unnecessary harm, expense, and sacrifice. So there's really 3 things you can do. You can make phone calls, or you can write 2 different kinds of letters to the editor. Both are really, really, really effective. So thank you so much for letting me share. I'm going to stop sharing now.
We're happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
I do. Can we get this information in another format? I couldn't copy that stuff. And I'm from Texas.
Oh yeah, I can give you the, I can send it. We'll send it to you.
Okay, so you have everybody's email address for this webinar?
Sandy, do we have everybody's email address?
If you registered, did you register for it on, yeah, then we have your email. And I was also going to say, if you get our Borderlands monthly updates, we'll be including some of this information in there as well.
Yes.
Just to let folks know, Arizona also as part of the budget established a border security fund that also can be used for construction of infrastructure, including border wall. So we also have those provisions that were passed in the state budget. And someone was asking about getting photos of and also posting on social media. I know Kate has shared the link to the film, and that's a good thing to share on social media. And then
Sally has for bronze.
And I was going to say I would let folks answer as far as the photos go.
I just put a link in. I've been talking to this guy who's been moving along the border for the last year, John Kirk. I don't know if any of you have had any contact with him, but he's a photographer who's been documenting and doing short videos along the border. I am likely to see him tomorrow. I don't know him well at this point, but I shared the site, and I know he has a high interest in his photography having increased impact apart from the media that he's involved with. So I wouldn't be surprised if he would be in absolute support of it being used for this kind of purpose.
He was in one of the photos that Kate showed right before you got on.
Can I answer to that a little bit? Meredith, John is a dear friend of mine, and we've been on the border together for about a year now, and he has everything on YouTube. So he invites everyone. Whenever I say, John, I needed that shot, he just goes to my channel. So you're right. He wants it to get out there. And so thank you for helping him.
I know that on our Borderlands team too, for Sierra Club, one of our volunteers is cataloging a bunch of the photos that we have gathered over the years, and is trying to do it in a way that they can be more broadly available as well. The negatives about uploading photos, by the way, to Google is they lose their that metadata. So just FYI, if you do that, keep them someplace else so you can still like know where it was and when it was. Other questions?
I just sent the link to this presentation that I just presented for the phone numbers.
Oh, perfect. Thanks, Sally.
And there, under the Great Old Broads Facebook, there's a lot of photos that were posted the month of May, I believe. Thanks.
All right. Any other questions from folks? No. All right. Well, thank you very much for a great presentation and for all you're doing to help protect the borderlands. I think some people think that the work is done because we have a new administration, and that is just not the case. And obviously there's a lot of harm that needs to be mitigated, and we need to keep pushing for that to bring down walls and to restore these areas so the wildlife can migrate the way it was intended. So, all right. So we're going to go ahead and stop recording now. And